بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I welcome all of you to this new course of ours in which inshallah ta'ala we will be covering this short treatise al-Minhaj min Mirath an-Nubuwwah by Sheikh Ahmed bin Yusuf al-Sayyid. This book, al-Minhaj min Mirath an-Nubuwwah, is a short treatise, a concise treatise in which Sheikh Ahmed al-Sayyid has collected a few ahadith which discuss some of the most essential and fundamental topics in relation to or in regards to our deen. Some of the most fundamental and essential topics of our deen are covered in this book. And from the title al-Minhaj, which means a complete methodology, this book aims to present a methodology for a Muslim to follow in these tough times that we live in these times when shubuhat, doubts have increased and the ummah faces multifaceted challenges from various directions. We as Muslims are in need of guidance. And where do we get this guidance from? Tab'an, we go back to the sources of our deen, the Quran and the Sunnah. And so this book aims to present an evidence-based methodology which a Muslim can follow to stay on the right path in these tough times. And inshallah ta'ala, as we explain the book, this idea and this concept is going to become more clear bi'idhnillahi al-kareem. Now, what is our agenda for today's lesson, the first lesson? Number one, we want to talk about why have we selected this book to start off with. Why didn't we select something like al-Arba'un an-Nawawiyyah or Bulugh al-Maram or al-Muharrar by Ibn Abdul Hadi or one of the collections in which you have a hadith from Sahih Bukhari and Muslim? And of course in this book as well we will find a hadith from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. But why this book in particular? Why not any other work of hadith? And then after discussing that, bi'idhnillah al-kareem, we will delve right into the first chapter of the book. So why this book in particular? Now, first of all, this is a book which includes around 160 ahadith and around 70 ayat from the Noble Quran. And this book includes ahadith and ayat on topics which concern every Muslim as far as their Islamic beliefs are concerned. Therefore, this book is a good guidebook, a good handbook for Muslims who are looking to know what the path of righteousness is, and for those who want to become du'at, for those who want to become students of knowledge, for those who want to discover this path, for those who want to become community leaders, and for those who want to live an upright life as good Muslims. This book is a good guidebook for that purpose. Now, we have selected this book in particular because, as I mentioned, this book aims to present a sunnah-based and an evidence-based, a Quranic methodology which a Muslim can follow in these tough times. Today, Muslims are faced with many ideological challenges such as secularism, such as feminism, such as liberalism. How do we deal with these challenges? Also, Muslims who are living in different countries, they face different types of challenges as far as their deen is concerned. And it is the responsibility of every Muslim to seek that knowledge which is wajib upon him, which is obligatory upon him, so that they can live their lives as righteous Muslims. Because at the end of the day, our goal is Jannah. At the end of the day, as Muslims, we look at this world as a place which we just pass by. This is not our destination. This is not where we are going to be spending our eternity in. No, rather this is just a place we pass by. So how do we prepare for the akhirah? Bi-idhnillah al-Kareem, this book is going to help us in that regard. It's going to help us, it's going to help give us a methodology which we can tread. Now, of course, there are other books like an-Nubuwwah, for example, which are more concerned with Jawami' al-Kalim. Those are hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which consist of few words, but they are comprehensive in their meanings. And of course, that's a very important book as well. Then we have books which cover ahadith al-ahkam. Those ahadith from which the fuqaha, the jurists, deduce jurisprudential rulings. Rulings of Islamic jurisprudence and Islamic law. But the reason why we have selected this book is because it is very relevant to our times. That this does not mean, of course, that other books of hadith are not relevant. They are, of course, relevant as well. But as far as the manhajiyya, the methodology, the ideological foundations of Islam are concerned, then this book contains those ayat and those ahadith which can tell us what we as Muslims must believe in and what our mindset must be like. What a mindset of a Muslim should be. And once that mindset is there, then that theory can be applied and the Muslim can start treading that path of righteousness. I also believe that this book is essential for any imam or any chaplain or any da'i or any talibul ilm who is working in their community. It is essential for them to study this book and to teach it forward, because again, this is just a book, this is just a collection of ahadith and ayat on certain fundamental topics which every Muslim must be acquainted with. Now, so bi-idhnillah al-Kareem, without further ado, we'll continue on to the first chapter of the book. The first chapter of the book is باب في مرجعية الوحي وشموليته ومركزية التسليم لله ولرسوله. باب, chapter on مرجعية الوحي, the revelation as a source. Marji'iyah, the word marji'iyah is from the word marja', which means the source, the main reference point, the point of origin which we return to. It's literally from the word raja'a, which means to return. So marji'iyatul wahi is the fact that the wahi, the revelation, and of course by revelation we are referring to the Quran and the Sunnah. The Sunnah also comes under the revelation, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not speak from his own desires. He only speaks through that which has been revealed to him. So the Quran comes under al-Wahi, and the Sunnah also comes under al-Wahi. And so it is important for us to realize that the Wahi is our ultimate source of guidance. That's what marji'iyatul Wahi means. And shumuliyah means comprehensiveness. That the Wahi includes comprehensive guidance for us in all aspects of our life. In all aspects of our life in which we are in need of guidance in, the Wahi is inclusive of that guidance. Now, so the revelation as a comprehensive source which we return back to. وَمَرْكَزِيَّةُ التَّسْلِيمِ لِلَّهِ وَلِرَسُولِهِ. And the centrality of submitting to Allah and His Messenger. What do we mean by centrality? What do we mean by markaziyah? Markaziyah, of course, means Markaziyya, of course, means centrality. And centrality, by centrality here we mean the central nature of submitting to Allah and His Messenger in our deen. That this is the focal point, the central point of our deen, that we must submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we must submit to His Messenger. Let us ponder over this for a little while before we move on forward. It is absolutely imperative that we as Muslims realize and recognize that our main sources of knowledge, our primary sources of knowledge, are the Quran and the Sunnah. This does not mean that we as Muslims deny the role of aql, rationality, or the role of senses, or the role of other sources of knowledge. We don't deny that. But what are the primary sources of knowledge? The primary sources of knowledge are the Quran and the Sunnah. And this is the foundation of Islamic epistemology. Epistemology, of course, is the study of how we obtain knowledge. As far as Islamic epistemology is concerned, our main sources of knowledge are the Quran and the Sunnah. This is where we get our deen from. The Quran and the Sunnah. And of course, when you study Usul al-Fiqh, we'll talk about other evidences as well, such as ijma' and qiyas and so on and so forth. But even those evidences, ijma' and qiyas and so on and so forth, they are based on the Quran and the Sunnah as well. In order for the jurists, for the ulama to agree on something, for them to reach a consensus on something, they must have some evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah. And in order for a alim to do qiyas of a new thing, they need something from the Quran and the Sunnah to do qiyas on. طيب, so all the other sources as well, they go back to the Quran and the Sunnah. Therefore, the Quran and the Sunnah are the primary sources of where we as Muslims gain knowledge from. This idea alone is enough to destroy the importance of secularism, liberalism, feminism, and other foreign ideological isms in the mind of a Muslim. Because now, someone who understands that the Quran and the Sunnah are their main sources of knowledge, they will understand that it is not the human desire which is the foundation of knowledge. It is not the human want which is the main foundation of knowledge. It is not culture which is the main source of knowledge, and so on and so forth. They will realize that. They will understand that. They will understand that our sources of knowledge are the Quran and the Sunnah. And this source of knowledge is comprehensive. It guides us in every single area of our life. Therefore, no one can complain that this source of knowledge is deficient. This source of knowledge is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who created us and the one who knows us best. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us systems for everything which we need to govern in our lives. Governing a country, governing a society, governing a family, and governing yourself as an individual. The principles for all of these are present in the Quran and the Sunnah. Once we understand that, in the mind of a Muslim, secularism, liberalism, and feminism have no legs to stand on. Because we understand that Islam has already given us systems. Islam has already given us a system of governance, therefore we do not need secularism. Islam has already given us a system of governing a family, therefore we do not need feminism. Islam has already given us a system of governing other aspects of our lives, whether that's da'wah, activism, al-amr bil-ma'ruf, calling towards the good, and nahi anil munkar, forbidding the evil, doing righteous deeds on our own, individual actions, everything. Islam has given us systems for all of that. So we don't need liberalism. We have the complete sources of guidance. All we need to do is we need to seek that knowledge. That's where we are lacking as Muslims. The guidance is there, it's present, but are we trying to obtain it? Are we trying to understand the Quran and understand the Sunnah and gain guidance from it? Whenever we are faced with problems in our life, are we actually going back to the Quran and the Sunnah or not? That's the first point. The second point is the centrality of submitting to Allah and His Messenger. And this is a very, very important point. This is a very important point. Most of our shubuhat and most of our problems, our ideological problems as Muslims, are solved if we just submit to Allah and His Messenger. That is the solution. That is the simple solution to our problems. Complete submission to Allah and His Messenger. What does that mean? What does the word Muslim mean? Muslim means someone who submits. Someone who submits. Islam and Muslim, these words are connected with the idea. Their focal point is the idea of submission to Allah and His Messenger. And we can understand that this theme, we can recognize, if we read the Quran ala wajh al-basira, while pondering over it, we can understand that submission is a constant theme in the Noble Quran. It's a constant theme in the Sunnah. Take Surah Al-Baqarah as an example. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks, when He talks about the Quran being a guidance for the muttaqun, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describe the muttaqun? الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the muttaqun, the God-fearing people, who are they? They are those who believe in the unseen and they establish prayer and they spend from what Allah has given them. And they believe in what has been revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of these are topics which go back to submitting to Allah and His Messenger. Look at the first one, belief in the unseen. Al-Ghayb, that is something we have not seen, but we believe in it simply because Allah and His Messenger have told us that this is there and this is how it exists and this is how you must believe in it. So we say, Ya Allah, we believe because you have told us to believe in it. We believe in it because your Prophet ﷺ told us to believe in it. That's submission. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about a nation who gained the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the adhab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the example of Bani Israel. And what was the biggest problem that Bani Israel had? Think about it. The biggest problem that Bani Israel had was, what did they say? قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا وَعَصَيْنَا. They said, we have heard the command, but we disobey. They were ordered to slaughter a cow, but they kept on asking questions because they didn't want to do it. فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. That is the example of a failed nation. A nation which failed. What was the reason for their failure? What was the main reason for their failure? They failed to submit to Allah and the messenger who was sent to them, Musa alayhi salam. And then, think about it. The example of righteousness which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives in Surah Al-Baqarah is that of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And what does Allah say about Ibrahim alayhi salam? إِذْ قَالَ لَهُ رَبُّهُ أَسْلِمْ قَالَ أَسْلَمْتُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. When his Lord said to him, submit, what did he say? What was his response? His response was the exact opposite of Bani Israel, that I have submitted. قَالَ أَسْلَمْت. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes Ibrahim alayhi salam as an ummah, as a nation on his own, an individual who is equal to a nation, the father of all prophets. Subhanallah. That is the centrality of submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the importance, the centrality of submitting to Allah and His Messenger. That is the focal point of our deen. And once we submit to Allah and His Messenger, nothing else remains a problem. We are not faced with any other ideological problems. Of course, submitting to Allah and His Messenger, again, it requires us to know what Allah and His Messenger have taught us. And this requires seeking knowledge about our religion. And remember, when we talk about seeking knowledge, that doesn't mean that every person has to become an alim or a mufti or a da'i or an expert on comparative religion and so on and so forth. No. There is a minimum amount of knowledge which every single Muslim needs to have. That is what we're talking about when we say seeking knowledge. And of course, there's an intermediate level of seeking knowledge, and then there's a more advanced level of seeking knowledge. Seeking knowledge has levels. And the ulama have mentioned them. Zarnuji, Shawkani, Ibn Jama'a, in their famous books, they've mentioned the levels of seeking knowledge. طيب, here we are talking about that which is wajib on every single person. Every single person. And from the first things which we need to address today, in today's times, are the ideological challenges which we as Muslims are facing. And arguably the biggest ideological challenge we are facing is that there are ideologies out there which are contesting the centrality of revelation. They are contesting the centrality of submitting to Allah and His Messenger with ideas such as individualism, with ideas such as every person can choose their own identity, with ideas such as separation of religion and state. All of these ideas, they are going against the very core of our deen. The deen of Islam is not something that's just private that you do in your room. No. This is what enlightenment, post-Renaissance enlightenment and post-modernists want you to do. They want you to make religion something private so that they can govern everything based on their own desires, based on their own policies. Because now when religion has been turned into something which is private, now the religion is not going to be the source where people take guidance from. And this clashes with the very nature of Islam. This clashes with the very core of Islam. Because Islam has come to demolish all foreign ideologies. Islam has come to reign supreme over every other thing. That's our deen. And our honor and our respect and our izzah as Muslims is in following our deen. It's not in following those people who have gone against our deen. وَلَن تَرْضَى عَنْكَ الْيَهُودِ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُم. Unfortunately today, just to please the foreign colonizers, Muslims have started to follow their path to please them. But in doing so, Muslims don't realize that they lose their identity. And the most important of all, they lose their dunya and akhirah. They lose their dunya and akhirah. They lose their dunya because they haven't used it to prepare for their akhirah. And they lose their akhirah because they sold their akhirah for the pleasure of a few disbelievers in this dunya. Inshallah ta'ala, in our next lesson we're going to continue from here, bi'idhnillah al-kareem. Basically, in today's session, what I wanted you to get were 3 points. Number 1, to understand why we have chosen this book. Number 2, to understand the importance of knowing and internalizing and recognizing the revelation as a comprehensive source of guidance, and to recognize the centrality of submitting to Allah and His Messenger. And inshallah ta'ala, in the coming session tomorrow, we are going to go through the ayat and ahadith which Sheikh Ahmed has mentioned in this chapter. بإذن الله. بارك الله فيكم. جزاكم الله خيرا.